Welcome to Module 2. Today we're going to talk about evidence-based writing. And when I say evidence-based writing, I really mean evidence. The biggest problem that people have with writing about themselves is actually thinking about how to put evidence into the statement. It's easy to say really nice things about yourself, like you're great at doing this and great at doing that. But for the purposes of communicating to somebody else as to why they want to work with you, it's really critical that you give them evidence to think about that. You can use that kind of information in personal statements. You can use it for cover letters, bio sketches, which is an event for writing a grant to the National Science Foundation, the National Institutes of Health, Department of Energy. All sorts of places require bio sketches, and they are changing in this particular, decade to being updated, so they have to be done online. But when you're going to do a grant application in this decade, for the most part, you need to be able to learn how to write a personal statement inside of what is a bio sketch that is part resume, part personal statement. You can use them in job applications. I've been forced to do them in biographical pieces for giving talks and meetings in all sorts of venues, whether or not they be a big meeting, a small meeting. Somebody's always going to ask you for a bio about yourself, and you have to come up with ways to introduce yourself that give people an idea of where your expertise lies. So you want to identify the things you're good at. Think about, what do you enjoy doing? Reflect on your experiences so that you can come up with the things that need to be in each of these different items, right? Because if you're using them for a job interview or an internship or a fellowship, they have to be a different collection of the things that you've identified that you really want to communicate to people. You almost never would submit the identical bio data to all the places that you would want to communicate it to. So collect all the things you think are going to be important and then sort them into the things that you need to write about. And here's just a sample of what those are. And I've mentioned some of these already, whether they be grants, job applications, applications for other events. You just need to have a collection of things that you want to put into these different documents for the audience that you expect to be there. An audience is one of those words we use throughout this STEM communication course, because audience is critical for the way that you communicate your expertise, for the way you communicate the most important things that for a given venue. The critical piece when you're talking about, say, a job application is that you can't tell people things, that you can handle anything. You actually have to give them evidence that you can handle anything. You have to give them an example. It's not just telling them you can do it, but you're actually giving them proof that you've done it before. It's not the first time. Now, if you've only done it once, that's fine. You don't have to tell anybody that. You just have to give people the example that you've actually made it work. Think about this description for a second or two, or pause the video, read it, and then think about it. What's wrong with this description? Here's a couple of things that you may want to think about. What are your responsibilities, not your accomplishments, right? You don't really want to tell people the job description. You want to tell them what you did in the job, right? If you just repeat the job description, they're not going to have any idea what you could actually accomplish, right? So you want to know, how many people did you supervise? Was it one person, or was it a room full of people? Was it 60 people, right? And what benefits did you bring to the situation? Did you change the way some things were done, right? Did you overhaul the process? Did you make it that much more efficient? How can you give people evidence that what you did was more than just job description, right? That success matters. Right? So think again about what this job description is wrong and how you could actually fix it. Give quantifiable evidence as why you think that you were great at what you did. Think of the rule of 3, right? Tell a story, and then think about how you can make that as powerful as possible. And target your audience. Always think about who you are giving this to, who you're talking to, who you're writing to. And it's tricky because we know from talking to graduates over the years that younger people reading resumes spend more time looking at the resume than cover letters. But older people reading job applications tend to spend more time reading the cover letter than they do the resume. So you need to think about both, not just one. On the resume side, you can actually have a computer help you. On the cover letter side, it's tricky. You need to actually make it personal. And you have to dig deep into where your interests lie and why your interests line up with the audience that you're trying to reach. So research matters. You need to actually look into where it is you want to put your efforts, where you want to go, what the lab is you want to work in, the company you want to work in. All of those things are critical for the way you put together your personal statement. Style matters. So you want to be professional and competent, and you don't want to use loose language in any way, shape, or form. You can do that once you get to know the people, get there for an interview, have a nice conversation. Maybe they take you out for drinks. Then you can be sort of a little more casual. Up front, you want to be as professional as possible. Don't use form letters. Make sure that you personalize everything you send to each of the places you send. When we get form letters that we know went to 1,000 people, we mostly delete them within 10 seconds. So make sure that you actually have done your research, you create a professional style, and you personalize your letters to wherever you're going to send them. Here's an example sort of made anonymized that I got about 10 years ago. And you can think about, as you read through this letter, why you might actually think this is horrible. I would delete this in seconds. And if I wasn't working on this particular course, I would have deleted it in 10 seconds. But instead, what I did was save it as an example of a letter that I want to tell you, don't do this, right? This is a letter that ignores what I do for a living. It ignores where their person could actually plug in. It ignores any aspect of personalization that could be useful for the person evaluating it to go, oh yeah, this person would be great in my group, or great in my company, or great in any way, shape, or form that would fit. This is a letter that tells people in bad English and bad form, everything about the person and nothing about the actual fit to where you want to go. Here's another example, not any better than the last one. It's just way too over the top in terms of, too personal and all sorts of information that somebody on the other end doesn't need to know. A better example is here, right? That gives reasonable information about background, why there would be a fit, why there's an interest. That's the kind of information you want to convey to the people you want to write. There's always the question, particularly nowadays, about thinking about how do you use AI to write text? How do you use AI to write a cover letter? And when you think about that, just think about some of the challenges there are with trying to do exactly that. For one, there's not much of a personal touch. AI is going to go out on the web and pick out a generic letter that doesn't have very much personal information about you. Now, you can feed it personal information, but it's going to stick it into a template that looks like a lot of others. There's no secret that if you use a mechanism that goes out and fits things into a generalized template, that's going to come out as a generalized letter. Right? It frequently will misinterpret data based on where it was trained. And so it's frustrating sometimes to make sure you catch all of the mistakes. In fact, I was at a meeting with a company the other day, and one of the things that was most important in that meeting was the training of people to catch mistakes in data interpretation through AI interfaces. That's almost as important as learning how to use AI, is to understand and spot when AI is leading you astray. Right? And it gives you a limited ability on the other end to judge what are the actual soft skills the person has. And this entire course you're going through is to generate your soft skills. So practice the soft skills and learn how to use AI maybe to help along after you've made it personal. Maybe it can help with a little grammar, but for the most part, you want to actually make sure that you've generated your own set of soft skills that then can be honed a little bit, maybe with a little bit of a help. So think about these other considerations in terms of personal statements that have not been copied. You can make that as a declaration in whatever you turn in. You always want to make sure that you're doing honest writing, right? And AI is your time management tool. So, you don't have to work on this for 3 days, but make sure that you create the personal part of what you want to get across to the audience that you've chosen to address. AI will not end personal statements. It'll just make them a little bit easier to read on the other end. So English, if it's not your first language, just make sure you write it in your first language or write it in a way that you're comfortable with. And if it's only fixing up the details, then it's a little bit safer than having it write it to start with. I have had students give me drafts of AI generated recommendations. And every time I get them, I have to fix them a lot. So again, they're not going to give you something that you want to turn in without adjusting it to being very personal. NIH is the National Institutes of Health, if you do or don't actually ever apply to them, have a very good set of descriptions as to what a biographical sketch should look like in terms of a very short 250 words or less declaration of why you're particularly good for doing a project, what makes you suited to do it, what's your background, whether or not there's anything in your background that would explain why maybe you don't have the strongest productivity basis, why you want to explain that maybe there was an illness in the family or a problem that can actually make somebody understand where you fit in the career site that you're at and why you're qualified to do a particular project. This is what the form actually looks like. Even now in 2026, as I say this, NIH has revamped the way that you have to turn these in. It hasn't changed the form, but it has changed the way you enter the data. So you will have to enter this into something called ScienceCV. It's the same format for NSF and NIH. And they'll actually ask you to input all of the data on the education side. They'll ask you to input a personal statement, and they'll ask you to put all the honors in one at a time, as well as contributions to science. So that none of that has changed. You still actually have to do that, but it won't let you do it in your own Word document. You'll actually have to put it in line. Here's one of the institutes. There's 27 institutes at NIH. This is how they describe what the best way to create a personal statement is in the BioSketch. Again, to go back to what it looks like, it's section A is the personal statement. It's still section A in the ScienceCV. So you're going to enter this description of what you do, and particularly if it's a fellowship, what's the value added for your career if you get the fellowship? If it's a regular grant, then what's the value that you bring to the project that actually makes it an ideal thing for you to do? Here's a personal statement example. This one's really tough to read. You could blow it up, but I'll blow it up for you. So here's the personal statement. It basically tells you all about the background of the individual, tells something about the first author publications, why it was important, where some of the training over time, and it even indicates that there were issues in terms of family health towards the bottom as to why there might have been, less progress than you might have expected, so that somebody who reviews this might at least understand why there might be lower productivity in one year or another. Comparable to applying to graduate school or some other place where there might have been one semester where you didn't perform well, and maybe it's because of a death in the family, a divorce, whatever. Things happen. People understand those things. Don't hide them. The thing is to actually make your record of achievement understandable to somebody else so that he can count it in your favor, not against you. So things to do in personal statements: shoot for depth, not breadth. If you've done 10 things, but there's 3 things that are really strong, focus on the 3 things. Rule of 3 is really good to think about relative to, give people a lot of depth about 3 things that tell the story about where your strengths lie, right? What drives you? Company meeting I had a couple of weeks ago basically said what they look for when they interview candidates is they look for passion. So make sure you incorporate where your passion comes from and provide evidence to support the statement. Don't just say, I'm passionate about this. Tell people examples of what shows your passion. Do you work overtime? Do you go to super extremes to do things that other people wouldn't do? So make sure you come up with the evidence, not just the statements. Be yourself. Don't ever try to think about the ideal applicant. Somebody's actually going to look at that and go, oh yeah, I've seen this story before. It's not going to help you in any way, shape, or form. If you get hired, you want them to hire them for you, not for some ideal applicant that you're pretending to be only on the interview side, right? Address the lab group that you're applying to or the company, whatever it is. Look at the unique features that interest you and that should interest them about you, right? Keep to the ideal match and why you fit out of a pool of 100 or 200 people, what makes you stand out above the others, right? And highlight your positives. Even if you know a negative, there's no reason you have to include it in the description. You want to highlight your positives, right? Evaluate your experiences. Don't just describe them, but evaluate what you got out of them. What was the unique aspects and how you use them to move forward. Make sure you proofread what you write. It's easy to make mistakes. Word processors are good at catching some mistakes, but not all mistakes. So if you just use a word that's spelled differently in a wrong spot, it won't always catch it, although they're getting better at it. But make sure you proofread it. If you've got a good family friend or somebody you work with who's not in your area, have them read it, right? Having somebody who thinks like you, works like you, read your stuff, they will actually read through the same mistakes that you do. So have somebody less familiar with it, proofread it. And prioritize readability. Don't try and pack more in by using a smaller font, less spacing, smaller margins. There are some grant applications that actually require certain font sizes, certain spacings, margins. You want to actually keep to the ones that are going to be most readable, not strange, but just simply readable. There are several things not to do in personal statements. So don't repeat a bunch of information elsewhere. If you're writing a cover letter, don't repeat the resume. Just highlight the things in the resume you want them to go looking for. The resume can contain more detail, but the cover letter should draw their attention to those things that are most important. Don't ever blame other people for things that are bad. Nobody wants a whiner out there. Just look for the things that highlight what you want them to look at on the positive side. Don't preach. It's not a sermon. It's actually something where you want to try and convince people that you fit what they're looking for. You don't want anyone to think, even if money is important, it's not the only motivator for you to take a job. Passion for a job doesn't mean, gee, I'm looking forward to making $1 million. If you're passionate enough, the money will come afterwards. Avoid cliches, because if they've heard it 1,000 times, it's not going to actually sound very good in your favor. And empty phrases that take up extra space do not help. Allow me to introduce myself is not going to do you any good. Brevity counts. They are reading a lot of these letters. And so the shorter you can get to the point, the more effective it'll be in your communication. And that'll be there on the science side when we get to the next module, right? As brief as you can be in a world where everyone is reading too much is a real value point. Avoid generic phrases that could apply to anyone. You want to try and make yourself unique. Yeah, I was on a search committee once that had a bunch of applicants that used unconventional formats, and it didn't please anybody on the search committee. They did things that were the left-hand side of the page, the right-hand side of the page, strange, weird fonts. None of that was particularly helpful for anybody on the search committee. They torpedoed all of them. So stick to something that's straightforward, easy to read, easy to look at. And avoid jargon. Of all things, if you paid attention in prior modules, then you already know that we're going to talk about jargon as the most evil thing you can include in STEM communication. You want to make sure that it can be read by anybody. And remember, if you're applying to a large company, HR reads it first, and HR are not engineers. HR are human resources. And so they may know some of the jargon you use, but not all of it. The resume will contain the jargon because the resume will speak to what's in the job application, right? Anything in the job application they ask for, they're going to have a search that an AI go through your resume to make sure those words are in there. That's fine. Don't duplicate that in the cover letter. Just make it readable to anybody who looks at it as far as the cover letter goes. Here are your deliverables for this particular module, right? As in all of the modules, there's going to be deliverables for all of them. They are in your Canvas shell. And please, if there are any questions, please contact Megan for further information. Should be pretty straightforward. I look forward to reading your deliverables at some point in the not too distant future. Thank you.